Anyone can claim to be a policy expert, but few really understand what's going on at the grander scale. From labor issues to the outrageous actions being pushed by government unions, this battle is complex. My name is Siena Rose, bringing you to the new front line of the battle. And with me is a born and raised Texan who can stand his ground in the ideological battlefield. Not only is he a freedom fighter, but he's a traveling warrior who hits the ground running whenever duty calls. Special Projects Director Rusty Brown. Rusty, welcome back to the podcast.
Thank you. It was a great intro.
Thank you. So let's start a little bit with background. I know a lot about you, but I think for anyone who's just coming into Freedom Foundation stuff, we want to know a little bit about what you were doing before now. So in a former life, you were appointed by President Trump as an advisor to the Department of Labor. Can you talk about what that experience was like?
It was an awesome experience. It was awesome, and then it got weird because I was there during COVID. So working for the Department of Labor was awesome. Trump's first administration, the Department of Labor held a overall policy goal of deregulation, and as a result of that, by the end of his term, it built the biggest, best economy the planet has ever seen. And I will proudly stand behind that all day. And then we went into COVID, and it got really weird. And all in all, it was still a great experience, but to end on that note was it was an odd one, but yeah, no, it was a fantastic experience. Loved being part of that administration. Love the things that we did there. It was great.
When did you come on to Freedom Foundation?
March of 2021. So actually, it was because of COVID in a roundabout way that I ended up coming into Freedom Foundation. I had originally looked to stay in the DC area. Whether, go to work, one of the millions of places, either in another form of government or, in one of the companies that has some kind of government service. The possibilities there really are kind of endless, but, it was because of COVID. I have kids in the school, and I was really disappointed with the way that they were handling the system over there. And I was like, I got to move back to Texas or to Florida or, somewhere where, it's still actually America.
Yeah.
So, in a roundabout way, I ended up with Freedom Foundation, and here we are. March of 2021 was my first week.
Yeah, well, I'm glad you came on. You're an asset. I know, Special Projects Director, you do a lot of different stuff. There's the Miami-Dade comes to mind, along with the stuff that's happened in Colorado. You travel a bunch, so I know you've been in Colorado quite a bit, and you were the one who brought to me the story about CSCA and the union down there.
Mm-hmm.
What first got you involved with that, and what did you think when you first heard that story unraveling?
So what first got me involved with Colorado Springs was some friendly organizations, I guess, let's say, that were working with the school board there to unwind the collective bargaining agreement that they have. Colorado has a unique set of labor laws in that it is not directed from the state. It's actually directed at the local level. So they have the freedom to do that. And if you take a look at the Colorado Springs, for the reason why they wanted to do it, rather, if you take a look at southern Colorado Springs District 11 was really the only unionized district in southern Colorado, and it was also the worst performing in the state. I believe it was like second or third to last, and was not the most impoverished, not by a long shot. And so you would think that, well, that's the reason. Well, no, it's because of the union. Like it's kind of like if you build it, they will come, but in the wrong direction. When you have a bastion of teacher union in a state like Colorado that has gone farther left. I mean, the Colorado Education Association has said some things publicly and publicly announced that they're going to be, for issues that would blow most people's minds.
Yeah.
Even states like California don't quite go as far as like some of the things you see coming out of Colorado, and it just didn't allow the flexibility to move the district where it needed to go, because the union is so focused on, the diversity issues and, the trans issues and things like that, they're not paying attention or even trying to move the needle to help kids learn math and learn how to read. And I mean, like, they're not allowed to teach math facts anymore in Colorado schools. Like, I honestly can't tell you like what the alternative to that is, but like if you don't remember the facts of like how you do these calculations, math was not my strong suit. That's why I went into policy. But I do remember that like there's these set of operations that you have to remember, and if you can't remember those, you're going to have trouble doing your calculations. They're not allowed to teach that anymore in Colorado, and that is not to the betterment of the education system.
Yeah, I mean, when I got to go down there and talk to the superintendent and Michael Gall and then Jill Hafley, it was interesting hearing what they had to say about the things like that Michael would talk about being the superintendent and knowing what his teachers needed, and then talking about what the union believed. It felt like it was just two different worlds talking to each other, like two completely different views on. It was just ridiculous, and it made me think about how I didn't know if this was an anomaly or if this was something that was maybe indicative of a problem across the nation. And since you travel so much, do you see stuff like this happening across the nation, or is Colorado maybe the first example of many to come?
No, I think Colorado is an extreme example because of it's a fairly like you see the crazier stuff coming out of bluer states. So Colorado is like recently a blue state. Some people would still argue that it's purple. I think it, you know, all that aside, that's kind of where you see it. So Colorado being on the edge of that, I think tends to make the more radical ideology, come to the surface a little bit more. It's like if you're like trying to move the state in this direction, you just got to be as out there as possible. So, like, but to answer your question, like, it's so crazy the two different worlds that it actually has to make you take a step back and be like, are they really trying to ruin schools? Like, who benefits from kids that can't read and write? And I mean, that's essentially, if you can't read, like, you cannot function in our society today. It is that simple. And we have this generation of kids that are not reading very well. And that is an undeniable fact. And the way that they've made it look better is they reevaluated testing. They didn't actually like start teaching kids more. They just lowered the standards for evaluations. And so it makes you take a step back and be like, wait, do we just have like a difference of opinion on how to get to the same goal? And that's where you kind of have to actually take a step back outside of America even and look at what, again, things like, Colorado Education Association, I believe it was year before last, end of 2023, at their annual conference, passed a resolution that they were going to, and this is a quote, oppose capitalism as an economic system and replace it with something more equitable. That's called communism. And you start looking at other places that are communist, like Cuba, prime example. I work in Florida a lot. I've met a lot of Cubans. What happened was you create a generation of people that are dependent upon the government, and then you're communist forever, because without the government, they can no longer take care of themselves. Mm-hmm. And I think that's where this faction wants us to go.
Yeah. Interesting. Well, do you think that unions and this mindset and their agenda have changed over the years, or is this something that's maybe has always been the goal, but it's steadily been growing to be more and more outspoken?
I think it has definitely moved that way, but I think what has really changed so much is the prevalence of government unions. People think unions, and what comes to mind for most people are traditional unions, like, where they're in a manufacturing plant and you got the shop steward and he's your buddy, and, and you're bargaining over profits, right? The government, there is no such thing as profits. It's budgets. And so you have this entity that stands to earn a profit, which is the union, off of bigger budgets in the government. They expand the budgets, which means they expand the personnel, they expand the, things that they regulate, and that's where you start chipping away at individual rights in our businesses and things like that. And I think the prevalence of government unions has grown the government, and at the same time you've seen a decline in private sector unions. And that's because, companies have gotten smart partly, but also because when unions came to be, that was like during the Industrial Revolution, where you had horrendous working conditions. And that's not the world that we live in anymore. all these things that were so horrible, we passed laws to prevent them from happening. And now, corporate America, yeah, you hear horror stories, but they're not even one-offs. They're like one in a billionth offs. But most people are just people, and they go to work and they want to do the best they can, and they want to help out their employees. And at the same time, if they make as much money as they can for the company, that means they get to hire more employees and pay everybody more money. And it's a pretty simple formula. If it's too easy to go find another job, you have to treat people right. If you don't, they go somewhere else.
Yeah. Do you think that unions in the past few years, government unions, have gotten more or less powerful? Or do you think it's a combination of that and also people not knowing the difference between the public sector and the private sector, like you just laid out?
I think it's that. I think you have this, you have in most people's mind what a government or what a union is, and they don't really think beyond that or do any research beyond that. I think they're more powerful in a sense that they control the government. I mean, I believe the last stat I saw, 40% of all government employees were now unionized. So you got half of our government, state, local, federal, is unionized now. And as opposed to 7% of the private sector, which was the inverse, in the late 60s when Jimmy Hoffa ran the Teamsters, and it was, and they were essentially mob controlled, and they were powerful back then. But it was a different kind of power, if they might go blow up some cars if you couldn't get a get a deal that you wanted done or something like that. But now it's such a different kind of power, in that they control government. I've never owned land in California, but right now you hear horror stories of people trying to rebuild their homes that got burned down in the fire, and just the layers of regulation and red tape to rebuild homes that have been there forever are, I think, making people realize that there's some serious problems.
Yeah. What do you think unions, I know you have a lot of interesting stories about unions and some horror stories. We'll get to those maybe later, but what do unions get away with now that you think would shock the average person? To someone who doesn't know what's going on, and you have all these different great examples to pull from. You and I know many, but I want you to talk about your favorites.
So the one I just talked about with CEA is kind of probably the most appalling, and I use that example frequently to try to explain how extreme these government unions, namely teachers unions, but all government unions really kind of are not far off, how extreme they really are. They're the same organization, whether you're in Texas, California, New York, Colorado. It's all branches of the same overarching company, which is the National Education Association and the American Federation of Teachers. There's two major teachers unions in the country, and they're, ideologically aligned with each other. So, the kinds of things that they get away with are, the one-off stories are, we represented a teacher in Florida where, the union rep barged into her classroom and was harassing her in front of the kids and why she hadn't signed up to join the union. That should never happen.
That's horrible.
And nobody knows that ever happened. Yeah, no, it is horrible. If you, when you see a protest, you mentioned Colorado Springs, they just had that strike, right?
Yeah.
You see videos of thousands and thousands of people there. There's only 200 people that were out of the actual school that was on strike.
Didn't you tell me they bust in people from outside the state and other districts and schools and whatever? Yeah.
This is public knowledge. This is not difficult to find if you did any amount of research on social media. They bust people in from Mesa County, which is or Mesa Valley, which is Grand Junction. It's 5.5 hours away. And the great part about it is people were actually wearing their shirts. So it's we've got pictures of the Colorado Democratic Socialists or the Library Union or
I didn't know that.
Oh yeah, and they're all wearing their shirts in the pictry of the strike.
Oh, for heaven's sakes! Do they have any foresight? I don't understand these people.
No, they're not if you want to get a movement together, they'll show up for each other for sure, but no. There's what they're I don't think anybody there knew that the strike was called for because the because the union president for CSEA actually just lost his, salary he was collecting for not doing anything.
Oh.
Like he was being paid by the taxpayers 6 figures for not actually teaching.
Oh dear.
And that was when the strike was announced.
Okay.
Not because of some wages. There was never a dispute on wages. Not because of any benefits or working conditions. Like that's the stuff that they tell people. But there was never that. They've never had I believe there was like a 20% raise like the year before for teachers. It might have been over a period of time, but it was a massive pay increase for teachers there in Colorado Springs, District 11. The union never argued with it in their last negotiation sessions. They were pretty happy with all that stuff. The stuff that they want to see are the ridiculous things, and because that's the secret. Like it again, it goes back to budgets. Like there's only so much money. Like the union has a say so in how it's allocated, but another great example, we're working with a teacher group in Florida. They passed a millage, which is like a tax increase, to give to teachers. Now, they think the people, you go ask the people what they voted for, and it was to give the teachers like a $5,000 bonus each. Not when the union got done with it. No, they give the oldest teachers to get like $7,500. The youngest teachers got $500. And they think they're giving that bonus to everybody, and that's what they voted for. Mm-hmm. And to me, that's appalling. And that happens in every school district where they have a say-so.
Yikes. That's sad to hear. I feel like you know a lot of really good stories, and I don't know why I'm always surprised to hear that there's another terrible, stupid thing happening, but that's sad. I can't imagine, like, being a teacher and voting for that and then feeling like you've been swindled, essentially. Moving on, let's move away from Colorado and some other topics. With all your travels, you have a really unique pulse on what's happening in school districts across the country. Are there any general trends or shifts that you've been noticing? I feel like in the last few months you've been literally all over. So, like, what have you noticed?
I feel like that too. So, as far as like trends and shifts, I think probably the biggest one right now comes from the newest Trump administration. Go back to the Republican National Convention, and Sean O'Brien, the president of the Teamsters, spoke, and to a thundering applause, because everybody agrees that the American worker as a whole, regardless of what you're doing, should be well taken care of. There's no dispute there by anybody. Now, what that means is open to some different interpretation, but it's such a small nuance difference from one person to the next. Like, that's not like a dispute. So the reason Sean O'Brien did it is because he knew that his guys were mostly for Trump. But so it was a political move for him. Now, most of the rest of the unions, really criticized him for that. Mm-hmm. But that, for lack of a better term, alliance has trickled down into these other things. And that, going back to what we talked about before, there's a big difference between public unions and private unions. The Teamsters are largely a private sector union. Now, not getting into, how, their effectiveness or the kind of employees that they, represent, but they are largely a private sector union. Unions like the National Education Association, the AFT, the more to the focus for Freedom Foundation and the type of employees that we engage with on a regular basis. Those unions have a very different agenda in that their focus is primarily going to be on political action, as opposed to the Teamsters, which, because they are representing private sector workers, they actually have to go and bargain over real dollars, every time a contract is going to expire. The government unions don't have to do that. The budget is the budget. It is what it is. Mm-hmm. There's some small questions over allocation, and they just make this gigantic document that looks complicated. But again, to reiterate some of the things that we've said, it's like people don't think beyond, this is a union, this is not a, the unions are unions.
Yeah.
And so that allegiance between the Teamsters and the Trump administration, I think, has created some confusion as to whether or not, we're friends with all the unions now. if you're a Republican lawmaker or something like that, and whether it be Oklahoma or Arkansas or Texas or whatever, it's like, okay, well, it looks like we're kind of supporting unions. It's like, well, which kind of unions? The Teamsters, which, yeah, they may not have a political agenda that you would fully agree with or even fully disagree with, but that's very different from the National Education Association, which has an outwardly communist agenda, and they would never support anything less.
Yeah. When it comes to, like, you talked about Colorado being a blue state, people would still argue it's a purple state, you could say. When it comes to red or blue states, are the divides between, like, these ideologies and are the fights as big as you would see? Like, are the issues happening in red states as much as they're happening in blue states? Is it universal across all school districts, or does even the home base state where it's at have an effect on the actions of the union?
So all the same things happen in every state, but it is to varying degrees.
Okay.
So, like, use Colorado, California as an example, where you have I'm sorry, Colorado's a bad example. Let's go with California. Colorado's a bad example because it's all local law, not state law. So skip Colorado. California. You have a friendly administration. If you're a union, you have a friendly administration. You have a friendly legislature. Virtually all the major city governments and counties are completely on your side. That's a different dynamic. Your political agenda there is just to take it as far left as you can, and that's where you can actually push for a more socialist agenda. You go over to a state like Florida, for example, they're still doing the same things. They're still advocating for the same type of issues, but they're starting from a lot farther to the right. So like California, they're not fighting back and forth over whether or not certain books are appropriate to read. They just demand this is the way that it's going to be, and there's no one there that can oppose them. In the state of Florida, Republicans have, a Republican administration under DeSantis, and, a supermajority has said, hey, look, maybe pornographic books are not okay for elementary age kids. And so the union decides they're going to fight that battle by saying they deserve to read To Kill a Mockingbird. Well, that's great. That was never banned. But that's the things that they use. And then the problem is there's no follow-up from the state level to actually say, look, this is what it is. They just let the unions do all the talking. So you talk to teachers around the state of Florida, and they're appalled by what's going on in Tallahassee because they think that it's, all these great American novels were banned. And that was never what was on the list. That was a complete fabrication by the unions. Then you come over to a state like Texas, and it's an even different problem because Texas actually banned collective bargaining back in the 90s. So we have 30 years of, people think there's no unions here, but yet 1 in 6 of our teachers, over 100,000, are actually union members, way more than most states even have teachers. So the dollars still flow to the National Education Association from here the same way. Now, Texas is a very odd state to work in because we're such a massive economy on the world stage, not just in America.
Yeah.
But also with a part-time legislature, so it gets very, very difficult to actually do any kind of special, out of the most immediate statewide needs. It's kind of hard for these little pet projects to happen. So, it's a different kind of a battle. So they kind of tend to focus on the local level stuff. And they, but the same thing happens. Like, they want to see payroll deductions. They don't bother telling people that half the dues that they're collecting is going to DC, to the national headquarters.
Florida. I don't want to talk about Miami-Dade a whole bunch, but I know there was a big decertification campaign in Miami-Dade. What do workers think? How do they react when they learn they can decertify? If they've been in a union, whether they like it or not, how do they feel? What's their reaction?
So it all kind of depends on what the local situation is. There are some, there's a group that we're working with that, their union is completely inept. Like from leadership on down, they are just absolutely useless. They do not have a contract with a pay schedule from last school year. Now this one's already over or half over.
Oh.
And they don't know what they're making last year. That's already done and gone.
Oh my.
So they have a very different reasoning than, say, like another group that we're working with. It's like their state level union involvement in their local issues is virtually nil. But yet, they're calculating up, it costs them. No, this is a very small unit of like 30 people, but they're calculating up. It's like, okay, wait a minute. We're sending them $18,000 a year, out of our dues, and then they're giving us a rebate of like 2,000, and we're doing all of the work. Like, why are we doing that? So for them, it's a completely financial decision. And yeah, and occasionally it gets into political issues because, you might have a more conservative group that doesn't like where their money's going, or, but the reasoning behind it's all over the place. But generally speaking, people like the idea, but all people are generally change averse. So that actually leads us down another road where a lot of times what we're doing is actually setting up a local only union and replacing the incumbent union that's a NEA AFT affiliate with a with one that's just completely local controlled.
Yeah, like the one in Oregon, the Powers Educators. Yeah,
Yep.
I remember that.
Yep. Exactly like that.
Okay, cool. We have a little bit of time left. I mentioned you have some interesting like union mob stories.
Oh.
Give me one of them. I know that the question we have written down, it's like with all the school board politics and union battles and power struggles, it can feel like mob territory. So what's the most mobbed up situation you've been in?
Oh man, I mean, I think every time I'm at a committee hearing or something like that, when they figure out that I'm not with them, somebody will threaten to harm me in some way.
Really?
Oh yeah, every time. Yeah. Without fail.
Ew.
Yeah.
That's crazy. What's like the worst insult you've been, or most creative insult that you've been called by someone who's on the other side?
Well, kind of a funny thing with the left is they can't really make fun of anything anymore. It's all not politically correct, so they're not real creative. But sorry to disappoint you. They're just it's usually not anything like real memorable. It's just, some sort of derogatory statement laden with curse words.
Okay.
About,
Fair enough.
me, whatever.
Okay.
It's I don't have any like, like just real good that I just sit around and laugh at night because they're just not that creative usually, unfortunately. It'd be funny if they did.
Well, I'd rather an insult be like forgettable than super memorable. I think if we're choosing, that's probably a good thing. Goodness. Is there anything else like you think is important to someone who doesn't know what's happening or like doesn't know the difference between public sector, private sector unions, or is there any other piece of information that you would like to share to the general public or anyone who hears this?
Yeah, again, take a look at, the National Education Association is the best example of this. These big unions, their financials are all public record. If you take a look at it, you can see what their priorities are. The National Education Association last year, I believe, brought in like $600 million, and 200 of that went toward political activities and gift grants and contributions to political organizations. Mm-hmm. Just think about that in any other business terms. Spending a third of your entire revenue, like that's not including salaries or anything like that, just a third of what you've brought in, not on your business, not on selling what you offer, not on servicing your plans, on a political pet project. And just like, what is that? It's like, okay, well, at the same time, you look at the line above that, which is representational activities, which is a little bit flawed, and it was only 39 million. So to put that in perspective, they spent 54 million on benefits for their own employees. So not salaries. So more money on benefits for their own employees, and they don't have a lot of employees, than they spent representing their 3 million members last year. And you tell me where their priorities really are. It is a political organization. They launder money in the name of of union dues, and they funnel it to political causes and candidates that'll champion these causes. That's all they do. They are not for the teachers. I can point to example over and over and over again where they, like we talked about the millage money. Go back to COVID, all the COVID, money. I think it was called, I may have the wrong acronym, but it was like, anyway, it's not important. But they had COVID money that was meant to be for schools. Well, the Florida government decided, okay, we're going to give every teacher in Florida a $5,000 bonus. What happened? The union seized that money. The teachers ended up with about $200. And that was never the point. So they are not for the teachers. They're not out there trying to make things better for teachers. They are trying to move this country to the left. And that's it.
Yeah. Well said, Rusty. I don't think I could have summed that up better myself. Well, thank you for taking the time to come on the new Frontline podcast. We'll have you on again soon, maybe.
Happy to be here. Thank you.